Today's daf yomi is Bava Basra daf Chaf Bava Basra 26. We're going to start on 25b at the bottom. Three lines in the bottom. Today's daf yomi is dedicated for a shmira for the chayalim, matzah for the shvuyim, Yeshua for Am Yisrael in this Eis Tzara. So Papa Yunah was ani, he was poor, then Ashir Hava, and then he became wealthy. So Bana Padna, he built a mansion after he got a lot of money. Now Havohana Chatsure B'Shivusa, there are these people in his neighborhood who used to press sesame seeds, Kiavidaiki Shumshami. Now they were there before he built the mansion because he was poor. That's what the commentaries say. He was poor and then he became rich. So they were there first and they were pressing their sesame seeds. But whenever he would press the sesame seeds, have a naide apadne, his mansion was like an earthquake. So also coming to Ravashi, he came to Ravashi to complain. Ravashi said, Ki Avinu be Rav Kahana, when I was with Rav Kahana, Avamrinan Modi Rav Yossi Begiri Delay. Said, even though they're doing it in their own property, and Rav Yossi says you're allowed to do something in your own property, but nevertheless, Rav Yossi would say it's not allowed if it was your own direct arrows that were affecting the other person. So Rav Yossi would admit in a case of Giri delay that it's not allowed. Vikama, how much is considered to be enough of a movement that you could tell the guy to stop? We're on the top of 26a. Gemara says, "Kedinayed nachtama apuma dechatzwa," enough to make the cover jump off the top of the barrel. Devei Mar Marion Braid de Ravin. So this is in the academy of Bar Marion, who was the son of Ravin. Kiavenavtze Kidna, whenever he would comb out his flax, Havazla Rikta Umazaki Inchi. So the part that was moving off from the flax would go out and damage the other people. So also Kame to Ravina, so he came to Ravina and he was saying, listen, they came to Ravina and it said that this guy, we're on top of 26a, this person is sending the chaff from his flax onto our property and it's damaging it. So Ravina said, Ki Amina Moder Rav Yossi, Begir delay. Yeah, when Rav Yossi said you're not allowed to do it, even though it's coming from your property because it's your own arrows, that's Hani Mili de Ka'azli Mikocho. That's where he's directly sending it. But Hacha Ziku de Kamamata. Here he's not directly sending the shaft from the flax. Here it's coming from the wind, so therefore it's going to be allowed. So Maska for Mar Baravashi. So Mar Baravashi challenges Ravina. He says, what are you talking about? Ma'ishna, how is this different from the case of Shabbos where it says Mizora Veruach Masayaso, where if you winnow on Shabbos, and the way you winnow is you throw up the grain with the chaff on it and then it separates it. We say Mizora Veruach Masayaso, if you winnow with something on Shabbos, that you're liable for the prohibition of winnowing. And there it's the wind doing it and it's not you. So he said, indeed, if you are combing the flax and it goes to somebody else's property, it's like the prohibition on Shabbos, so of winnowing with the wind helping you, and you're going to be responsible for Shabbos and also responsible for the damages. Mara says, well, Ravina, and according to Ravina, who doesn't accept that, because why? Rash says, Ravina says there's a distinction between Shabbos. Shabbos requires Melechas Machshavas. Shabbos is different. It requires your intent. There we're going to say that you're responsible, but you can't compare our laws of Shabbos to the laws of monetary matters. So therefore, he says that we have a different question on Ravina. How is it different from a spark that came out from a hammer? There was a spark that came out from a hammer, the hizik, and it damaged somebody else. The chayav l'shalim, there you have to pay. Meaning, say, if you're hammering on you're hammering with your blacksmith and the spark comes out and damages somebody else, you have to pay. How come in this case to the chaff, you don't say you have to pay? So Ravina says, Halsam nichoe delezo. There he wants the spark not to go into his property, he wants it to go out. Here he doesn't care if the chaff leaves his property. He doesn't care. It's not to his benefit. The chaff doesn't bother him on his property. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, a person is not allowed to plant his tree next to his friend's field unless he distances 4 cubits. The reason is, as Gemara explains, we need to have 4 cubits space because he needs to use the plow. And so therefore, if it's going to go right up to the friend's field, he's going to be going into the friend's field to plow. So you have to leave 4 cubits. Whether it's a grapevine or any tree. Let's say there was a fence in between, so then he's not going to go into the other guy's property. Then they can go right up to the fence. Let's say there were roots going into his friend's property. Then he has to go 3 tefachim deep so that the plow doesn't get ruined. He's allowed to, so basically, let's say the roots were going to his friend's field. He's allowed to cut out the roots that are up to 3 tefachim deep so that his plow doesn't get ruined. Let's say he's digging a pit, then he's allowed to go down even more and he gets to keep the wood. But who's the one who gets to keep the wood? Gemara is going to have to discuss that. So first we have some Gemara says Tana Arba Amos Amr, these 4 cubits that they said that you have to leave before you dig in the neighbor's, before you dig on your property, you have to leave 4 cubits between you and the neighbor. Is Kedei Avodas HaKerem, so you could work the vineyard. So Amr Shmuel Shana Al Beretz Israel, that's only in Israel. But if you have Babylon Shtei Amos, there they had a different technology for their plows. So you only have to leave 2 cubits. We have a price that says the same idea. You're not allowed to plant next to your friend's field unless you distance it by 2 cubits. Don't we say 4 cubits? So we see it's like Shmuel said, it depends. If it's a Babylonian plow or a regular plow, Babylonian is 2 cubits, Israeli plow from the land of Israel is 4 cubits. Some had this whole discussion as a contradiction. Okay, now we have a story, a powerful story. Rav Bar Chanan had some palm trees next to the orchard of Rav Yosef. So then the birds were coming, and Yosef b'dikle v'nachti b'pardisa umavsidei. They were going; these orchards were going, and they were sitting on the palm trees. And then after they were sitting on the palm trees, they were going into the orchard of Rav Yosef, and they were somehow ruining it. So Amrulay, what? I'm not sure exactly what they were doing, but they were attracted to the palm tree, and that was causing them to go into the orchard and ruin Rav Yosef's orchard. So Amrulay Zil Kotes, Rav Yosef said to Rabbi Rav Chanan, time to cut down the palm tree. You're ruining my orchard. So he says, he says, I'm 4 cubits away. He says, yeah, 4 cubits away works for trees. I will go fund him. But for grapevines, because they're going into my grapevines, but you didn't need more space. Mar says, but don't we learn that this is the case whether it's a grapevine or any tree, that you have to be more than 4 cubits away? So so he says, yeah, this is for one tree to another tree, or one grapevine to another grapevine. But if you have your tree coming to my vineyard, we need more space. So Rabbi Rav Chanan said to Rav Yosef, okay, you got me with your arguments, but I'm still not cutting it down. Now I'm a Rav, because we have a teaching that Rav said, I dikla the time Kaaba. This is a teaching attributed to Rav, that if there's a tree that has a kav, which is an amount of fruit, that it bears an amount of fruit, you're not allowed to cut it down. You're not allowed to cut down a tree that bears a kav's amount of fruit. So the Amar Rabbi Chanina was shachiv shechas beri. Not only that, Rabbi Chanina said the reason why my son Shechachas died was eladekatz ta'anasa v'ozimnei. Doesn't have a source for this, but he says the reason why his son died was because he cut his fig tree down in the inappropriate time before it was supposed to be cut down. So Mar inichale likus. He says if you want to cut it down, you're able to cut it down. but I am not going to do it. And so he was afraid to cut it down. So the Gemara says, but what about Tosfos asks, what about all these cases that we had in our chapter where he says you cut it down and you have to pay for it? So we could always say that those are talking about trees that don't bear fruit. So that's what Tosfos has to say. So the Gemara says, okay. And a lot of times people have these questions today. They have houses where they need to cut it down in order to expand, or they need to build, and there's a fruit tree. So a lot of rabbis are afraid to paskin on the basis of this Gemara because they say it's spiritually dangerous. Papa had some palm. Yes. That's what these rabbis are saying. You don't want to answer the question. That they're afraid to answer that question. They don't feel like they can give you a good answer. Yeah, you don't have to answer. Yeah, Meyer, you had a question? Right. So
back when Tram was probably a restaurant down.
Yeah, no, that's Meyer has a good point that people you're cutting down, you're messing around with a lot of things, and it's very spiritually dangerous. And so people are afraid to do it. Yeah, Jeff has a question here. Jeff, what is your question?
I'm wondering why Rava didn't make the argument about indirect damage, because it seems like this is a classic case of indirect. He planted a tree, then the birds came, and then then the birds went into the vineyard. I mean, it's like 3 levels removed. The tree's obviously not causing the damage.
No, because we said explicitly that you're not allowed to do something if it's basically it deviates from the principle here. That's what our Mishnah says. You're not allowed to plant your tree near the friend of your friend, near the field of your friend, unless you're a certain amount of distance. Right. So this is basically indirect damage. So he's saying, yeah, but it's the damage is coming. Rabbi Yossi saying, even according to Rabbi Yossi, I guess it'll be according to the Rabbanan. Right. It should have been on the principles that we've said until now. It really should have been permitted because of the indirect. But it's still
the Mishnah is talking about roots, which is a direct.
No, the Mishnah was not talking about roots. The Mishnah was talking about the plowing that you're plowing, that you're trying to plow, and right, that would be causing the damage.
But also not relevant.
What?
Yeah, the plowing has nothing to do with the birds flying into your vineyard.
Right. Right.
Well, if a plow breaks when it hits a root,
yeah,
it's a tremendous. Back then, it was tremendous damage. To replace a plow, you have to go to a blacksmith one, and it stopped the whole agricultural cycle of that man until he got a new plow. It wasn't just a plow. But when they talk about fruit trees, they talk just fruit trees, or includes blackberry and
it does include that. Yeah, it's a good point also. But
anything fruit bearing, or it has to be specifically a tree the way we imagine a tree. With
we have to look up exactly that. But the point is, that's a good point also, Meyer. But going back to Jeff's question, the issue is also that really the comment may not have been able to, but what the issue is that it's midas chasidus, from the act of piety. Maybe he didn't really have to cut it down, but he said, if you want to do it, you do it. I'm not going to do it. So we go on to the Gemara. Papa Papa had his palm trees on the border of Rav Huna. So he had his palm trees on the border of Rav Huna. So he went and he found that v'kakayit sharashav. So he went down and he discovered that Rav Papa went and he found that Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yeshua that he was digging in the earth and he cut off the roots of Rav Papa's palm trees. So Rav Papa said to him, "What's going on here? I'm roy my eye. I'm roy tanan. Are you sure Hashem yotzim v'toch shochavero? Mami shlosha kadesh lo yaakov v'machrish." He says, "I'm allowed to. I don't want to ruin my plow. I'm roy." Hani mi li shlosha, but Mark Chafer says, "Yeah, you're allowed to dig down 3, but you dug more." I'm roy ana boros shichlem aros kafarna. He says, "Yeah, because I'm digging wells. I'm allowed to dig deeper." You're allowed to go down and dig it, and you get to keep the wood. I'm Rav Papa. I'm really kuli. So Rav Papa said, I said to Rav Huna all these proofs that he couldn't cut it down, and I wasn't able to defeat him. Until I said to him the following. We're on the top of 26b. That let's say you have a border, and then the community was using it for certain things, to make, let's say, a path, that you're not allowed to get rid of it, even though it belongs to an individual. And also, I had the right. I have my tree here. You can't just go and cut it down. So after he left, then what happened was, Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yeshua said to himself, "Oh, after he left, why didn't I say to him that if it would be within 16 amos, then you would have a presumptive right that I can't ruin your tree. But beyond 16 amos, your tree is no longer drawing nourishment from that, and so you don't have that presumptive right, because even though they go all the way until 25 amos, they're only nourished within this first 16 amos, as we're about to say on this daf and on tomorrow's daf. And so that's the distinction. Outside of 16 amos, I could cut it down, even though you had a presumptive right to be there. So now he said, so it says that if he was digging these pits, he could cut it down and gets to keep the wood. So who's the he gets to keep the wood? Who's the one who gets to keep the wood? So he says, okay, we learned this in the Mishnah, Me'ilah, Amarle, Tenisua, we learned this in the Mishnah, Me'ilah. So let's say you have the roots of a person who is hedjot. You have the roots of a person who's not owned by the temple, that and that comes, and what was going on here was that you had the roots of the of something that was not owned by the temple, that came into the property owned by the temple, then you're not allowed to benefit from these tree, because the roots are in the domain of the temple. But nevertheless, if you do benefit from them, you're not in violation of the prohibition of Me'ilah, because they're coming from a tree that's not temple. Now, Iamris Bishlama Basar Ilan Azlinan, if you want to say you're going following the tree, Mishim Hachi Lo, and that's why it's not considered misappropriation. Aliyah Basar Karka Azlinan, but if you say we're going after, I'm sorry.
Why isn't it?
We're just explaining that now. So he says, if you want to say you follow after the tree, then we're going to say that's why it's not considered to be misappropriation, because the tree is in the non-temple property. But if you're saying that we go after the land, that if we say we follow the land, and why is it not considered misappropriation? So we see from here that the roots follow after the tree. And so therefore, the owner of the tree should not be able to take the wood for himself. So this answers our question that the wood belongs to the owner of the tree. And that's why if you benefit from those roots, it's not considered Me'ilah, because the roots belong to the owner of the tree. So that answers Bill's question. Why is it not Me'ilah?
It was planted in property that would be considered.
It wasn't planted there, but it went into the property there, because the roots follow after the tree. So it's the owner of the tree. So Gemara says, "Oh, what do you want to say? Pastor Elon, you want to say we follow after the tree? What's the next clause? They must seifa shel hektish habam b'shel hedjot. If it's the temple property's tree, that goes into the non-temple property, well, nanim and you're not allowed to benefit because it's connected to the temple, but you're still not considered to be misappropriating it. Or you on Aslina, and if you want to say we follow after the tree, and why are you not allowed to? Why is it not misappropriation if we're saying we follow after the tree? Isn't that indeed the temple's tree? So Gemara says, me de area. So therefore, we have to say you can't bring a proof from this Mishnah because our Mishnah is talking about roots that grew after the tree was sanctified or after the land was sanctified. Because and we say that the laws of Milah don't apply to something that was grown after that fact. By something that grows from temple, the laws of Milah don't apply. Meaning to say the laws of biblical sanctification only apply to something that was sanctified at that moment. But something that grew after the fact, that's only rabbinically prohibited. And so therefore we can't bring a proof from this case. So Ravina Amar Lokash, Ravina gives a different answer. He says, Kan bitoch sheish esrei kan chutz sheish esrei. He says, Ravina gives a different answer. He says that the first clause of the Mishnah, where it's from the tree, from the non-temple property that the roots grow into the temple property, that's not going to be considered to be Mi'ilah because they're getting nourished within 16 amos, they're getting nourished from the tree. But the concluding clause is where the roots are beyond 16 amos, so therefore they're in the non-temple property. It's not Me'ilah because beyond 16 amos, and it's not connected to the tree anymore. And so therefore, they belong to the owner of the land. So now we have this teaching of Ula, very important teaching. She's going to introduce us to the next Amud, next staff, a very, very important principle. It's going to take you back to your days in math. Let's say you have a tree that's next to the border. So if it's within 16 amos of another field, your tree's roots go into the other field within 16 amos of the tree being planted. Gazlan, the thief is stealing from the other person's field, and therefore, as a consequence, you can't bring the first fruits. Why? Rashi says because the bikurim, it says you have to bring from your land, and if the tree is being sustained from another person's land, it's not going to be considered your land, and so therefore you can't bring the first fruits. So therefore, Ula says the tree has to be the first 16 amos in your field in order for you to bring the bikurim from it. Otherwise, it's not your land. And also, you can do a different source. What about the fact that it's mitzvah Bava Basra? That's what someone erased. But first, let's just do this approach. So since not your land, Gemara says, where does Ula have this principle that the tree is nourished until 16 amos? If you want to say, you learn this from the Mishnah in Shavias. Now we know that not only are you not allowed to harvest the field in the sabbatical year, there's something called Tosefah Shvius. There's an additional add-on to the sabbatical year that you can't work the land in the 6th year in a way to prepare for being harvested in the 7th year. But you are allowed to do work at the end of the 6th year to preserve what's in the field so it doesn't get ruined. So we learn in the Mishnah in Shvius, Esther Natilos, let's say you have 10 saplings, that they are scattered over a field that's the size of a seah, which is 50 by 50 amma. Then you're allowed to plow the whole year, the whole end of the 6th year until the Rosh Hashanah, because this is a law from Moshe Sinai that even though you're not allowed to plow any orchard after the holiday of Shavuos of the 6th year, nevertheless, if it's saplings, small saplings, you're allowed to plow it so they don't get ruined. And we learn from here that it's 10 saplings in a field of 50 by 50. And so we see that how much does a tree get nourished by? 1/10 of a base saw, meaning that each one is getting one saw. So meaning to say, since the 10 trees are nourished in one base saw. So they're each getting 1/10 of a field that's 50 by 50. So now the Gemara says, well, what is the size of a base saw? Kamehavalu. What's the size of a base saw? Trey alfin v'chamesh mea garmide. It's 2,500 squared. That's a saw. That's 50 by 50. It's 2,500 squared. So how much does each sapling need, according to this Mishnah? Masan v'chamishin, 250 square amos. So halo havi de ula. So that's not like ula, because according to ula, how much does each tree need? 16 amos in every direction, which is 32 square amos, which is 1,024 squared amos. And so that teaches us that according to ula, that's is much greater than the amount in the Mishnah, because the amount in the Mishnah is 250 square amos, and he's saying it's 1,024 square amos. So we could say that you can't learn this source from this Mishnah of the 10 saplings. So we want to know what's the source of Ula, and we're going to figure that out on tomorrow's daf. What's the source for Ula's statement? Anybody have any questions about this beautiful Gemara that we've been establishing here? Any questions about this?